6 months into retirement, and I noticed something unexpected and more than a little concerning. My brain just started glitching. Nothing big, no smoke coming out of my ears or alarm bells ringing, but just this slow, kind of like a coastal fog that rolls in. And, you can still see, you can still drive, but everything just feels a little less sharp than it used to. And it's not one big thing, it's these cluster of little things that roll in like that fog when you make that leap from your career life to your retirement life. Things like scattered thoughts that just kind of swirl around your head looking for a place to land, or not being able to make a decision on a path forward without having this full-on committee meeting in your brain, or just that vague sense that your brain's switched to a different operating system and your apps are glitching out and needing to update. These brain glitches, this fog that feels like it's rolling in, those can be easily misunderstood and can feel a lot more concerning than what they actually are.
Hi there, I'm Denise. I started this fully alive journey after winning a pretty tough battle with cancer. I came away with a whole new perspective and appreciation for life. Now, as I'm leaning into retirement, I'm discovering and sharing practical ways to live a fully alive life for many years to come.
So let's look at these 8 symptoms of this early retirement recalibration that our bodies go through. And I've grouped them into 3 clusters. And so the first one I'm calling the drive is gone. And these 3 under this cluster all have to do with that neurological dopamine loop. Your brain has been running on this dopamine loop, a predictable dopamine loop, for most of your career. And when that's gone, your brain is searching for a new dopamine loop. So the first one is this kind of this vague sense that something is off. It's not quite anxiety, it's not depression, it's just, something feels off and you just can't quite put your finger on it. It's not this big red flag, not a yellow flag. It's just like when you're driving down the road and you see this wisp of fog come across your windshield and you think, well, this is just going to pass. But a mile or 2 down the road and that fog begins to thicken. It crept in for me so gradually that I almost missed it. First 2-3 months, just didn't pay much attention to it. And now 6 months in, I can see that really was that first sign that my brain was needing to recalibrate. So after that vague wisp of fog comes across your windshield, one of the things that I noticed was just this lack of motivation. Yes, I'm in retirement. I have all this free time. And, in my mind, I thought I would be doing all these great things, but I just couldn't seem to find the motivation to move in a direction. This has a lot to do with that dopamine loop. In our working years, we always had something to aim at, goals and projects and deadlines and task lists. And when that's gone, our brain kind of is in this holding pattern, waiting for new goals and new dreams to chase. And this slowing down, this non-motivation, has actually been very healing for me, just that frenetic pace that I lived in for so long. This pause has just been a huge blessing for me. It's unexpected to feel unmotivated for a very motivated person, but understanding what's happening really helps. And so that's the motivation piece of this dopamine loop. And the second one, though, is a little bit different, and that is being, directionless or untethered. Because on the days that I was motivated, did have that kind of energy to do something, I just didn't know which direction to go in. I'd have 6 things swirling around in my head, and I'd try one and no traction there. I'd try another and no, that wasn't it. And I would just bounce around all of these things, just not sure which direction to go in, what was going to get me on that dopamine loop. So those are the three symptoms under this, the cluster of the drive is gone. Just that vague feeling, that first wisp of fog across the windshield, and then the non-motivation, just my engine isn't running, and then finally that directionless, that feeling untethered and not sure where you even want to go. So our second cluster of symptoms is the brain feels different, and we have three in this cluster, and this really is that cognitive brain fog that we feel. So you have all of these neurological pathways that your brain has just been running on. Very easy. These are clear pathways that your brain just knows how to do automatically. And now that you're recalibrating to your retirement life, those pathways are gone. And your brain is having to create new pathways. And that is expensive, exhausting work for your brain. So the first symptom that I saw was this decision fatigue over just small things. I'm someone who can usually see things pretty clearly, start, steps, finish, just have that kind of brain wiring naturally. And so this symptom really showed up pretty strong for me. Small decisions like, what do I do now? What's next? Where do we need to go with this? We just don't realize how much our brain just does automatically until we're thrown into a new operating system, a new environment, where our brain needs to work pretty hard to find those new pathways in our lives. So here's a prime example of what that looked like in my life. So I had pulled out all the plants from my backyard garden area and put down some weed cloth and bark mulch and prepped it to put the plants back in. So those plants, after I'd done all that hard sweat work, just sat in the middle of my yard for a week or two. I just had that, I don't know, decision fog roll in pretty heavy. And I didn't know where to put those plants. That should have been the fun part of that whole project. But that's just a classic example of this decision making that your brain just is glitching and can't move forward. And so the second symptom in this cluster is this mental fog or reduced clarity. This is where those thoughts just feel slower or more disorganized. It feels like you have all of these thoughts swirling around in your head. They're kind of scattered and looking for a place to land. And this one caught my attention as something definitely weird for someone who's usually very organized and on top of things. I had to start writing down things in my life. I know, ridiculous, but they would just fly out of my brain if I didn't get them written down on paper. Knowing that this is a normal part of this process was a huge, can I say huge? A huge relief. And so the third symptom is this surprising mental fatigue. My retirement life, I was doing significantly less than my 9 to 5, at least less brain work. And yet I felt more mentally tired. Come to find out that background update that we're running in this new retirement life, that's not cheap. It takes work. And this mental fatigue is just your brain sending you the bill for all that work it's doing in the background. I'm very much in the middle of this one. I just don't feel like doing a lot right now. And I'm grateful that I have this slower pace of life to just let that update happen. And so cluster 3, I'm calling this emotional undercurrent. And sometimes other people will notice this one before you do. It's like your emotional regulator that had been running on a certain current, your work current for all those years, and now it's having to switch currents. So the first symptom is this low grade anxiety or restlessness. It's that feeling that I should be doing something, but I'm not sure what. And when I'm relaxing, I don't really feel like I'm relaxed. Like your brain is searching for that something, and it just can't seem to find it. I know often I'll sit in my lawn chair in the backyard and listen to my brain do this searching, 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 and it just doesn't know what to hold on to. Understanding what's happening makes it feel a lot less unsettling and allows me to just let it run. And so our eighth symptom is this emotional flatness. Things feel a little more distant, a little more disconnected, a little less excitement. For decades, our jobs gave us things to be emotional about, deadlines and challenges, just all the things that go with work. And when that's gone, there's this emotional drop. It's not broken, it's just waiting for new material. This is the one that I missed completely. So a friend and I were having lunch, and she asked if I was okay. Kind of took me off guard, but that emotional energy that I usually bring to our conversations just wasn't there. I realized she was noticing something that I had not even seen myself. If we step back and look at these 8 symptoms, they all point to the same thing. Your brain structure that it had relied on for decades is now having to rebuild itself. And so the question isn't, what's wrong with me? A better question is, what is my brain recalibrating right now? And when you look at it that way, this stretch of foggy road that we're driving right now makes a lot more sense. It doesn't make it any less weird, but it does kind of make it understandably weird. After decades of a career-based operating system, your brain is working really hard to recalibrate and give you a new operating system. So until next time, here's to our glitchy, foggy, wonderfully weird retirement recalibration.